Welcome back to the Advancing Healthcare Innovation Show. I'm your host, Michael Stamatinos. And if you're new to us, super excited to have you here because we're bringing very exciting conversations with leaders who are painstakingly shaping the future of healthcare. And we happen to be very passionate around healthcare innovation, adoption, leadership, and access. And if it's your first time tuning in, let me just tell you a little bit about what we do here. So we're a healthcare innovation company that's focused on bringing stories of innovation within our space to life. And the aim is highlighting real people that are truly innovating within the space and giving them the platform to share their stories with our community and with the world. And we've got just an amazing, incredibly action-packed year planned with new content and some incredible interviews that have already occurred. And if you haven't had the opportunity to check those out, highly encourage you to do so. But make sure you hit the subscribe button now so that you can get any of the new content coming right into your inbox. And as part of our commitment to keeping you updated with the latest advancements and solutions within healthcare, we bring these innovative leaders that are really pushing the boundaries and shaking up the industry. And I'm honored to actually have a very esteemed guest and thought leader and innovator, and a dear friend here, Ray Guzman, who's the CEO of SwitchPoint Ventures. And as an Army veteran, Ray's tenacity and commitment to service are very evident, and they've been evident throughout his career. And he comes from very humble beginnings. Ray's journey to success is really very inspirational. It's inspirational to me and many others, and he serves as a testament to what it looks like to live with grit and the desire to make positive impact, lasting positive impact. And his journey's really exciting and interesting. And one of his stints was chairman and CEO of WPC Healthcare, where he executed a triumphant turnaround that ultimately resulted in WPC's acquisition by Intermedics. And in his current role right now at SwitchPoint Ventures, he's responsible for all aspects of the business and overseeing the company's interests in its portfolio companies. And we'll talk about them during this interview. But his expertise and leadership have really been, to me, from what I'm looking from the outside, is they've been instrumental in transforming organizations through AI. And Ray also serves on the board of various companies and organizations, including Entoto Gear, S3 Recycling Solutions, Staffing as a Mission, and Winnow. So Ray also happens to be an advocate for social missions, empowering women, and supporting career transitions and leadership training. So Ray, it's amazing to have you on the show today and to be able to share more of your story.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, as I was sort of sharing your introduction, what goes on in your mind when someone is sharing a bit of your story and articulating from their point of view? What goes on inside of you when you hear that?
Yeah, it was interesting listening to it because you don't really think of it, that way. So I guess there's a lot there, and it makes me think about all the steps along the way and kind of the journey that we've been able to walk so far, and kind of curious about what lies ahead.
Yeah, there's been a big craze about AI in the news, and just been a lot of talk. But you were on that bandwagon pretty early. How did you know? Talk me through that, because that's very interesting when people that are coming in and see things a lot earlier than most.
Yeah, we were a bit early. There were some early jokes with our investors in WPC that maybe we were a little bit too early, but it turned out we were kind of right on time. How did you know? I'm not sure that I knew per se, but it seemed obvious to me that the level of complexity and the problems that we were trying to solve in healthcare were going to require a higher level of capability than we had with simply, automation tools, workflow tools, productivity tools. And so we just started thinking about what healthcare could look like, and frankly, where the macroeconomic kind of forces were pushing it, and came to the realization that something had to give, and AI seemed to be a perfect approach to solving for some of these more challenging problems. And so We started small by bringing in a chief data scientist to lead data science practice. So we were just doing consulting in the beginning to kind of get our feet wet and get a presence in the market, start establishing ourselves, but quickly evolved to building our own products that ultimately got us on the path that we're on now.
So in terms of the evolution of SwitchPoint, you talk about investment, but you guys do things a little bit differently. Can you talk about sort of the fundamental differences between a classical venture shop and sort of how you and the team are approaching venture today?
Yeah, great question. So we're a venture studio. The venture studio model is broad, so there are different kind of flavors of venture studios. The way we think about the world is we like to build the things that we take to market. So we don't have a fund. We don't write checks beyond funding our own concepts. Everything that we do is actually ground up development, innovation, and we don't do anything without a partner. So we're not we don't have the hubris of a lot of seasoned entrepreneurs that think I know what the next big problem is and I'm going to go build it and then convince the world they need it. Our perspective is most of these healthcare operators, these leaders know where the challenges are. They just don't have a thought leader alongside them that's capable of actually executing on something innovative that would actually address whatever the problems that they're thinking of are. And so from our point of view, we want to have that development partner there. We think that's the most important element. We're seasoned enough to know how not to build something for an N of one. So I don't want to go solve your problem, Michael, and then take something to market and it turns out that problem was distinctly yours and no one else has that same pain point. But once we prove it out with that initial development partner, we then spin that concept into a new co and we'll capitalize it at that point, bring on a management team, and then take it to market.
Incredible. So let's dig in a little bit more about how you prioritize these problems. So let's just say you have a partner and the partner comes to you and expresses an area of concern. Walk through, without divulging any IP, but to the degree that you can, walk us through that problem understanding workflow. And then how do you then realize outside of that particular partner, like how do you go and then cross-validate it that this is really the circumstance across many other areas? Can you maybe share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, great question. So our model is, we're the subject matter experts on the AI. You're the subject matter expert in the domain that you're in. And so that really gives you license to ask what people will sometimes call like the stupid questions, right? And so you bring a problem to the table. We're unafraid to ask really basic questions about it. And it's interesting because doing so allows you to get to the root cause of what the issue might actually be. And that's often very different than what the operators bring into you. And so it's almost the 5 whys or the 7 whys where you just kind of keep asking why does something work a certain way. And eventually you start to get to a level of understanding where you can then get creative. To answer your second question, that's when we pick up the phone and start sending emails and ask people for time on their calendar. We want to validate the problem statement, but we also want to validate whatever our thesis might be about what we're endeavoring to go build. And so it's one thing to fully understand the problem. It's a whole nother thing to try to grasp whether the thesis you've formed about how to solve for that problem is actually going to resonate in the marketplace. Our experience has been, we've been at this for 12 years across multiple companies at this point. And our experience is, the models need to be really, really good, right? But I would submit to you that's table stakes. I mean, you should expect any good AI partner is going to have good, high-performing models. We think that more than half the value, or at least half the value, if not more than half the value, lies in the utility of those predictions and models. And so that really gets into like, what's the workflow for the end user? When is this information relevant to whom? How do you make it actionable? Is it something that people are willing to take action on? And so a lot of the work that we do goes into really understanding that as well. And so we'll do that across different types of settings in healthcare, different sites of care, different sizes, different tax status, profits and nonprofits run their businesses a little differently. So we want to make sure we've got a good grasp of the market and validate kind of our thinking and our thesis with as much of the market as we can before we go down the path of developing anything.
And is there, if there's a problem that you get excited about, and I know you're pretty even keel person. But how do you take out emotion? How do you take out any kind of bias when you're going into a validating conversation where you don't want to sort of lead the witness?
Yeah.
Any of that you can maybe share?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's very insightful, actually. What I would say to you is not all ideas are good ideas. Not all ideas are actionable ideas. And so I would start by just saying we seek to understand what is the scope of the problem, like why does it matter and to who. We tend to get particularly excited when we see an opportunity to impact lots of people. So you're aware, some of our portfolio companies that we've built up over the years. And so just to give you a couple of examples, Polaris was designed to help operators better schedule their resources. And so we live in a world where you hear most people say we don't have enough clinicians, we don't have enough nurses, et cetera. And at the same time, if the data suggests they're not scheduling them appropriately, then maybe the answer is we do have enough bodies, if you will. We're just not allocating them efficiently. And so that starts to impact access to care, cost of care, availability, et cetera. And so while in one sense it's just ones and zeros, and we're just doing some really hard math to figure out how to predict demand 8 weeks out so that you could schedule appropriately, the human element behind all of this is we want to make sure that we're coming alongside these operators to run their organizations more efficiently, to create access to care. And frankly, the folks that are generally hit the hardest by this are the more rural communities where it's the hardest to get resources in to begin with, which might be a good segue into another portfolio company, which was Winnow. And as you're aware, Winnow is an AI focused recruiting platform. And the big idea there was similar to Polaris, the parts of the healthcare system that are most severely impacted are the places that are the hardest to recruit to. And yet there's a subset of clinicians that probably would love to be in a given market. And so when you think about how we do it, how the system operates today, it's a zero-sum game, right? I've got to win the battle to get that clinician and say yes to come to my location. If you were to take a step back and think about it unemotionally, it's an optimization game. Who belongs kind of where? And can we use data to help inform that so that we're targeting the right people? The last thing I'll say about Winnow that was especially compelling for us and for me personally, you can draw a straight line between access to care and the outcome or the care, the health of a community. And so said differently, where we don't have resources, we also have worse health outcomes in given communities. And so it has a direct impact on people's, somebody's grandmother, somebody's sister, themselves, et cetera. And so something as simple as recruiting, we never saw it as trying to get warm butts in a seat. It really was about how do we optimize this at scale in a way that gets resources into the communities that are hard to recruit to so that everyone has a chance to have access to quality care.
It sounds like to me that you've got this. Maybe it's a superpower, but you've got this ability to be able to kind of look in, but then also zoom out and see bigger picture. What is your superpower, Ray? If you could kind of hone in on one, what would you say that it would be?
Yeah, mine would, in that context, mine would definitely be zoom out. But the kryptonite, if you will, to use that analogy is, zooming in is really hard, right? So I'm not super detailed. I'm not an operator, if you will. So a lot of this is just about having the right team. I mean, I think it's important to note, our core team's been together for that 12 years building solutions and markets. So we've just got a wealth of experience together and really lean into each other's strengths and offset each other's weaknesses in a way that lets us do what we've been doing the last dozen years.
Can you maybe talk a little bit about the alignment that you have with the partners in terms of the buy-in from operators that are feeling these types of pain points that want to solve them? Talk about that relationship a little bit, and what does that mean? What is the expectation from the development partner sites? What does that actual innovation and collaboration look like on like a day-to-day?
Yeah. So within SwitchPoint, our partners, we're pretty well versed at kind of what we're doing. And so everyone kind of understands which lane each of us occupies, and we just work really, really well together. I think the other part of the question you're asking me is how do we take that and then implement that in real life? And that's where it
Yes.
gets, that's where it gets really, really hard, because when you think about kind of corporate structures, if we're honest about what we're doing here, they're inherently designed for things not to break, right? in many respects, innovation is coming in and breaking things, doing things differently, changing how things are happening. And so just inherently, like at the starting block, you're already kind of running into opposition, not from an individual, but more so the way organizations are structured from the get-go. And so it's about getting alignment. It's about communication. It's about helping everyone understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, why it matters, and how, and frankly, most importantly to them, how it's going to affect them. And if you can align all of that, which mostly centers around communication, then you can start to at least chip away at kind of the infrastructure that is designed to kind of reject any kind of change you're introducing into the organization. And so that journey, that's not a straight path. You have all sorts of personalities involved, and at one level you have people worried about their jobs, and at a whole nother level you have executives that are worried about the project and the expense they signed off on, that if it fails, maybe it looks bad on them. And so you're trying to manage that range of kind of emotions across the organization to make sure that everyone feels good about what we're doing, remembers why we're doing it and why it matters. But there's no shortcuts. It's not easy. I mean, I don't want to.
It's not. We know it's not easy. Otherwise, like, I think everyone would be innovating, and we would live in this utopian society. But that's not reality. Is there maybe a story or an example you can draw upon when things didn't go right? One, like an embarrassing moment. Share something where you're like, oh gosh, big learning lesson here. Now that you're looking back on it.
Yeah. Can't think of an embarrassing one, but are there stories where things didn't go right? All the time,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you can almost bet they're not going to go right. And so to me, partnership is a lot about, what do you do when things aren't working as expected? How do people respond to that? How do people react to that? That's when you find out, who you've got as a partner. And so trust, transparency. I have anybody who's ever worked with me knows I have a thing, and it's no surprises. So we don't surprise people. So you don't wait till things are at the last mile and then say, hey, we're off schedule, or this isn't working right, or these predictions aren't working, or whatever it might be that we're working on. So you build trust through communication, through transparency, and you get to lean on that trust that you've built up when things aren't going great. It's also about expectation setting, right? If you show up and you're making all these commitments and you're positioning things as if they're going to go perfectly, then that's what people expect. If you show up and you're having a conversation that says, hey, we've done this a lot, it's never a straight line, it's going to be a roller coaster ride, these are the types of things that can happen, and these are, we are well versed in kind of mitigating those things. So you've picked the right partner in us because we know how to navigate the complexity that lies ahead. That's really the story. That's really the secret sauce, if you will. So many people, so many of us go through life wearing a mask, right? There's a commercial right now for a particular drug, and literally somebody's walking around with a mask on, blocking their face because they're presenting to be a certain way when they're maybe not feeling that way inside. And I think we do that a lot in corporate America, and it just sets us up for failure. And so I'd rather just kind of lead with the truth, help people understand how this will and probably won't work, help give them confidence that we know how to navigate that journey, and then we go through it together. And so when that first hiccup happens, they're not caught off guard, they're not surprised, or not disappointed. They're ready, and more importantly, they're ready for you to come with the solution to whatever that challenge might be. So, as I was saying that, the one that came to mind is when we built Polaris. It was a really, really hard. It was probably the hardest thing we've ever built. And without getting super technical for people, there was a huge AI component to it. There was a huge operations research component to it. And you don't normally put those two things in the same solution. You're starting to see more of that now. But when we built this a few years ago, still not rare now, definitely more rare then. And so it was difficult to build that solution, and it took us a little bit longer than we expected, by a magnitude of a couple of months, which for us is a lot. And so we had to go back and continue to just communicate with the partner that, hey, we've got these models, but they're not performing the way we want, or the AI models are tight, but the OR part still requires some work. And so it was just going back and forth. And it's interesting because in a lot of these organizations, they think of technology, and so they want to pull you kind of into an IT framework. And that's one thing when you're writing an application that's just a kind of a straight, application.
Right.
When you're inventing something, it's hard to know when that breakthrough is going to happen. We have a process, and that process is really efficient. Certainly, it's the most efficient I've ever seen. But that said, when you're encountering something that's really, really difficult, that's also never been done before, you can't necessarily predict when exactly you're going to have the breakthrough. And so that was a tough one, and the effort went on probably 3 months, 2-3 months longer than we originally planned, and certainly lots of conversations about it with large groups of people, and these big high pressure meetings, and all you can do is show up and just tell the truth. There's a book I reference a lot called Getting Naked from Patrick Lencioni, and it was when I was working with HCA way back in the day, it was something that they were reading quite a bit and were sharing with their partners when I was at Microsoft at the time. And so they recommended the book, and I loved every minute of it, because the whole point was, hey, instead of showing up with your mask, sorry, you'll have to edit that. The lights shut off.
We're good.
Instead of showing up with your mask on, how about you just show up with vulnerability, with humility, present yourself as you are. Everybody stops the song and dance, and you can cut to the chase really efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just worked really, really well for us. And so that's what we do. That's who we are. That's what we're known for.
You mentioned innovation and invention in sort of a similar
Yeah.
thread.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on those two words? Are they one
Yeah.
and the same, or are they do totally different things?
They can be one and the same, but they also can be different. And I know that's a really
Interesting.
that's a really political answer, right? It's like a yes and yes, right? But I guess when I think of innovation, for me, it's anything that challenges status quo, right? So it doesn't have to be technology. It could be a simple change in a workflow. It could be adding a resource where one didn't exist before. It could be, changing the paint, on the color of the paint lines in a parking lot that makes it, so that could be innovation, right? That it doesn't challenging the status quo and actually doing something about it. That's broad brush. That's how I think about innovation. I know there are very traditional textbook, B school answers for that, but I just gave you the way I think about it. Invention is creating something that doesn't exist before. And so they are different, but it can be the same, right? The invention itself can be innovative because it challenges status quo in and of itself. And so that's why I said I think it's a little bit of both. I see them as separate, but they can also be together.
Getting back to what you mentioned around, you mentioned like a 2 to 3 month delay. Can you talk about the duration of these sprints that you're doing as you're validating and then as you're building? When is the product sort of completed and then actually actively deployed? Is there like a time frame that you all are looking at doing this in, and what is that time frame?
There is. So I would tell you, this always surprises people, but these highly sophisticated solutions we build start out really, really basic, which basically feels like a consulting engagement. We get in there and just roll our sleeves up and want to make sure we really understand the problem. And so, I could think of solutions we've built where, we've had to show up in an ED, in ER at 4 a.m, multiple days in a row, because guess what? You want to talk to a nurse, you want to talk to a clinician in the ER. That's about the time of day they can slow down and actually talk to you. You want to see what it's like to live a day and walk a mile in their shoes. You got to be there. You can't replace that. When you try to do that, it's a shortcut, and you're going to end up more likely than not with a solution that doesn't fully solve the problem or gets rejected when it's time to deploy. So the first thing I would tell you is it's highly consultative in the beginning. It's very, inquisitive. We're learning along the way. I mentioned earlier, we're the AI subject matter experts. We're expecting our partner to be the domain expert for whatever it is we're solving for. And so we show up with that humility and just learn and ask and just kind of work through understanding the problem. Once we have a grasp on the problem and what our approach is, so what we would actually do to solve the given problem, we go through and we'll build out what we call a version 1 of the solution in a 90-day period of time, which is really, really fast.
Yes.
But we get that 1.0 out there, it works, right? The whole point is to get something in market that works. that you can prove, has some value, but you're going to get beat up. I mean, there's a lot of, that's where the feedback game kind of starts, right? And we update the platforms or the solutions monthly. So we have monthly updates, and they're aggressive. I mean, we move very, very quickly. To answer your question, the other question, it's never done. Software's never done. So it can always be better. And so you're either improving something that's, already there, or you're expanding the feature set in a way that the market's asking you to. And so you're just always going to be, it's a never ending game, if you will, of innovation, development, testing, feedback, and then going back to the lab and starting that process all over again. So short answer, from the moment we know what we're building, we have something in market typically within 90 days. Polaris was an exception. It took a couple months longer than we expected. But of all the things that we've ever built, that's the only one I could think of that took longer than we expected in our process.
That's amazing. Healthcare is, people talk about innovation within healthcare, but it is notoriously slow. So to see the speed of which you're able to build and deploy and get the actual feedback that you need, that's amazing to hear that.
Well, that's one half of the coin, right? The other half is the partner, and that's where it
Yeah.
gets challenging. And so again, honest conversations with them, setting expectations appropriately, et cetera. Implementation, is typically pretty fast. Getting people to use the solution, that's where rubber meets the road. And so it just requires a lot of communication, a lot of effort, a lot of work. But from a SwitchPoint perspective, we go fast and we get something out in market pretty quickly, get the validation. I guess to finish the thought, once we get that 1.0 out and we've got our partner using it and we have real feedback, SwitchPoint then will typically spin that product out into a new co, and we'll raise capital into that new co. We'll hire a management team, and then we'll get underway. And typically that's pretty early. So like you interviewed Paul a couple months ago with Winnow. Like he's a great example of that. We had a thesis. We had a development partner in Ardent Health Services. We knew pretty quickly this thing was going to be, a go. Paul joined, immediately at the onset and helped co-found this business, and then we were off and running.
How do you find other capable leaders?
That is the hardest part of my job, I think. It's not binary, but as early stage as these companies are that we found, it feels almost binary. You get the wrong person and it's an uphill climb to try to, salvage the business, the investment, the company. You get the right person and it's like putting kerosene on a fire. So a lot of it is instinct, just having a lot of experience hiring people. But, instinct, I was talking to a very prominent partner at a prominent VC firm in Silicon Valley, and he asked me that question, and I said, we go with our gut a lot, and he had a really strong reaction to it and just said, well, we use data and we have a process. And I said, look, we do too, but the truth is our instincts are shaped by the data that we've used in the past to make decisions and what those outcomes are. So when you hear go with your gut, like that has a way of sounding like you're just throwing caution to the wind and flipping a coin. And it's like, no, it's really the culmination of a lot of experience that's informing what we call our gut when you're making that decision. We go through a process where somebody on the team finds somebody they think could be a Portco CEO. We each spend time with that individual one-on-one. We'll often also do kind of like a team interview, not in an intimidating way, just a very conversational way. But we're just trying to bring different perspectives to the table from our side to see, does everybody bought off on this particular individual? And if the answer is yes, then what we'll also do is we'll go to the development partner and say, hey, we think we're going to hire so-and-so as Portco CEO. We'd like for you to spend some time with him or her as well, because we want to get a perspective from one, the development partner who's going to end up working with this individual a lot, but two, some semblance of market feedback beyond our own potentially echo chamber about who we offer a job to and not.
It just seems to me that the passing of the baton from going from SwitchPoint, that is like, you're incubating this thing. It's like a fetus. It's very, very delicate. And that aspect of moving it there it's It's make or break,
Yeah.
right?
It's funny, you're poking on the two hardest aspects of the job. I think the first one is, how do you find the talent that you entrust to essentially care for your baby, to kind of use your analogy there.
Yes.
The second one is, how do you have enough oversight? Oh, each of these companies we spin out, the SwitchPoint members end up having a pretty meaningful equity stake in those companies, and so pretty important to us how things go. And also, we want to make sure our investors generate a good return for each of those port codes. And so there's a fine line between governance and control, and allowing the CEO to actually be the CEO. So I have learned and continue to learn, how to be a coach, how to be a really good coach. And so even though I end up being chairman of the board in each of the companies that we spin out, so effectively I'm the CEO's boss, at the same time, I like to think of myself as their thought partner, as their sounding board, as maybe the only person in the world besides them that has the full context of what they're dealing with, and that they can talk to without that mask I was talking about earlier. And so, I've got to be really careful. I've got my own set of experiences. I've had boards that, I reported to in previous roles, and I don't, if you're not careful, if you're giving out a bunch of advice, you've effectively just, if you're directing everything, you've basically just hired a manager with the CEO title. And that's not what we're looking to do. When we recruit people into these CEO roles, they're actually CEOs. They get to call the ball. They get to make the hard decisions. My job at that point becomes being a really, really good coach, asking the right questions, helping them think through whatever they're dealing with critically, and just being there as, along the way as they make the decision and go implement. It's hard. It's tough though. We've got a lot at stake in each of them. And so it's, it's really easy to want to be a consultant and just go, no, this is how you should do it, or I would do this. And that's a lot harder to say, walk me through the pathways that you see to solve for, whatever the case might be, and kind of tease it out. But it's a hard part of the job, but it's also a really rewarding and fun part of the job as well.
Yeah, especially when you can pour into someone and then you see them take it to the next level. There's nothing. It's pretty awesome.
Absolutely. I mean, we've had a few wins along the way. Our team has now had 4 exits. 3 of them have come under this studio model. And it's just been really fun to see first-time CEOs take something. I mean, it still blows me away to this day, Michael, that you take, something that is an intangible thing, an idea, a thought. You put some energy behind it, you build a team, you go build a solution, you build a bigger team, you take it to market, you raise some capital, and you look up, and 2 years later, you've got 15, 18 health systems on your platform, depending on which solution we're talking about, on your platform. And you've got, investors and strategics going, hey, we'd love to own a piece or all of, what you just built. The 2 moments of like complete euphoria for me professionally are, one, the breakthrough, right? The innovation, which is just figuring out how to solve the problem, whether it's through a different process, through a different approach, or just through brand new technology. The second kind of euphoric moment, if you will, is at exit, where somebody in the market's validating the putting a value on what you built, and basically putting an offer in front of you. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work. I'm giving you all the high points. I should the most important influence in my life outside of my faith is my wife. And we were at dinner about 2 years ago, and it was a particularly stressful time. She just kind of said to me, and to give her credit, I think she phrased it in the form of a question, so it was even less direct. So I really had to process, the thought. But the gist of what she was communicating was, you do realize you took the most stressful job in the world, which is doing a startup, and you figured out how to do 5 of them at the same time. Like, no wonder you're so stressed. And it's like, I hadn't really thought about it that way. So, I don't, it's a lot of, it's a grind, there's no way around it. But the highs, make it worth it. And to your point, you said something earlier, I do try to be even keel, because, and anybody that works with me will tell you, the highs are really high and the lows are really low. And if you ride that wave, it's going to wear you out. And so we just got to figure out how to manage that. One of our Portco CEOs, about a year into his journey, one of my first questions in each of our sessions is, how are you doing? Like, I always want to start out
Yeah.
personally, how are you doing? And he made a comment to me, and he just said, it's scary how good I've gotten at compartmentalizing things. And I said, hey, welcome to the job. I mean, you have to, right? You have to.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I'm I'm smiling now because I want to transition to this next segment called Explain That Post. And throughout this time, you have been making little quips and comments just around masks and things of that nature
Yeah.
and just being even keel. And I want to read a couple of quotes that you've posted in your timeline thread on LinkedIn. And
Okay.
I just want to get your just reaction to them. So the first one is when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Maya Angelou. What
Yeah.
strikes you
Yeah.
when
Believe
you hear that?
them. Yeah. I think it's important to have grace for people, but I think people tell you a lot about themselves. We just don't slow down enough to actually pay attention and listen. Most people will tell you who they are. We're so busy thinking about what we're going to say next that we don't even hear them. And so, um, it's the whole fool me once, fool me twice kind of thing, right?
Absolutely. And you mentioned about, the highs and the highs or lows, but staying even keel. How about this one? Perpetual optimism is a force multiplier. The late Colin Powell.
Sorry, you broke up a little bit. Can you repeat that one?
Perpetual optimism is a force multiplier. Colin Powell.
Yeah, look, well, for one, Colin was a huge inspiration to me when I was in the military. My wife bought me his book. You'll see a recurring theme every critical point in my life. My wife was the catalyst. So, but she bought me his first book, and it just made me think about my military career differently. But to go to his quote, yeah, look, it's hard. So you've got to know, you got to know your why. And if the why is big enough, if it's meaningful enough, then we've got to just remain optimistic that what we're doing matters. We've got to remain grounded in the fact that what we're doing matters, and we've got to remain optimistic about the outcome we're endeavoring to achieve, because we know it's going to make a difference. Mindset is everything, and we're really just now learning how important our mental health is to everything around us, including the relationships, the work that we do, et cetera. So you got two choices in life. You can go in thinking about things in kind of the most negative light, or you can be optimistic about it and get after it. And we just choose the latter. And it absolutely is a force multiplier.
Last quote here. Every exit is an entry somewhere else. Tom Stoppard.
Yeah. So this one's a good one in that I don't know of any startups that didn't make multiple pivots along the way. And so you hear, when a lot of times you hear people tell their story, it just sounds like they had this perfect entrepreneurial journey. They had an idea and they wrote, a few lines of code, and then they went, worked out and took a shower, came back, and they had, $2 trillion worth of orders. And, some strategic was offering $1 billion for their 4-hour-old idea. And it's like, is it possible it happens that way for some people? I'm sure it does. Is that the exception? Absolutely. The truth is, whatever you're going to go build, you have your idea, you're going to take it to market, and then the market's going to tell you what they think about it, and you're going to have to adjust, and you're going to have to adjust, and you're going to have to adjust. And I always joke around with people, you're a few pivots away from the company you're trying to build. You might as well know that going into it. And so, that quote for me just means it's about resilience. It's about finding a way. It's about persistence. And, if one door's closing, then it just means another one's opening, and step through that threshold and figure out what's there.
So we're closing towards the end of our time here, and I just want to make sure I give you enough time to, share with the community what's the best way to follow your work, to follow the work of SwitchPoint. Just share a little bit of a commercial and maybe even a little bit of a flavor as to what folks can anticipate coming out of SwitchPoint in the future.
Yeah, I'll start with the latter and then work my way to the former. We are leaning heavily into this notion of what we do in a corporate partnership sense. So we built Winnow with Ardent Health Services here in Nashville. And along the way, we came to realize with them, and really through a lot of their prodding, that we're going to build this solution and then go off and look for the next really big problem. And, Ardent's leadership just thought, well, we know where the problems are. You don't actually need to go anywhere. We can just get focused here. And so we ended up putting a joint venture together where we're doing this together kind of permanently, right? Perpetually. And so it's become a really good partnership where we've got, pretty long list of things that we're going to go build together. And several, they're all in different kind of stages of development, either from a ideation perspective all the way through, approaching getting funded perspective. That model is working really well. We think that's a big part of our future, is leaning into kind of a corporate innovation joint venture studio model, some hybrid of that. We want to go nail this with Ardent, perfect the kind of corporate part of what we're doing. So how do you do this with a corporate partner at scale? But once we get pretty far on the path here, I would expect that you would see us go enter into similar partnerships in other segments of the industry or other industries. We wouldn't do this with another health system, because you're going to run into a kind of idea conflict where Ardent may want you to solve for a problem that they're dealing with, and if you're partnered with another health system, they're gonna ask you for the same thing. And so how do you deal with that? So we just rather avoid that altogether. And then in terms of following us, we've got you can find us online. Website or LinkedIn is probably the two most prominent ways to follow us. And same thing for me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I don't post a lot, but I read a lot. I do have a blog. I don't write as much as I want to, but we're one of the things we're talking about and going into 2024 is doing better about being more active on digital properties. And so I think going into next year, you'll see us have a lot more to say than we've had in the past.
Yeah, I just appreciate you being very honest and not coming on here with a mask and just being you. And it's great to be able to kind of follow your story. I've had the privilege of getting to know you a little bit more, so I know a little bit more than the normal sort of general public. But I think it would be a really amazing thing to be able to track the stories that you're continuously generating, and just being able to have folks consume that and also get inspired by it. You mentioned around other partners, and not necessarily particularly health systems. Who's the ideal next type of partner if you're thinking about making a big impact on society and within health and healthcare? What does that ideal partner potentially look like, and how can our community maybe help you or add value to that and that
Yeah.
next one?
Yeah, great question. I think going back to something I said earlier, we're looking for somebody who rejects the status quo. They have a mindset of continuous improvement. They're open to new ideas, new approaches, and yeah, we want to make a difference in our work. So it would need to be an opportunity where our contribution could positively impact people at scale, and they have the mindset I just mentioned. That's our ideal partner. But we're not even searching for that right now. We really are laser focused on our joint venture with Ardent and just learning how to be a really good corporate innovation partner for them before we endeavor to go try to do this with other people, in coming years.
Amazing. Ray, it's been so nice to kind of have you on. And for those that have tuned in, if you found this conversation to be helpful for you, would you mind sharing it on social media and even just engaging with it, even just following Ray, following SwitchPoint Ventures and what they're doing? I'm grateful, especially when folks that are trying to make a difference, that are in the grind every single day, as Ray mentioned, and are trying to really move healthcare forward. Let's give them a little bit of love. So Ray, I'm looking forward to maybe having you come on in the future, or maybe even having your wife come on. She sounds like a pretty special person, so that might have to happen.
That's a great idea. Would love that. Well, hey, look, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for just giving me some time to share my story with your audience.
No, it's my pleasure. All right, see you soon.
Okay, thanks. Bye.